Welcome to After the Visit, proudly brought to you today by Have a Chat. This podcast is going to be about what really happens after customer conversations. Not the polished CRM version, but the reality once the visit ends. The car door shuts and the next meeting is already calling. We all know the feeling. I'm talking with sales leaders and operators about how relationships are actually built, maintained, and sometimes lost in the space between meetings. Today, I'm joined by Elliot Goldstone. He's spent 15 years leading sales teams in the vertical transport and HVAC industry. And this is not about deals or tactics. This is going to be about execution, trust, and what great looks like when things get busy. So we'll get straight into it. Just to start, Elliot, can you give me a bit of context on your role today and the kind of sales teams you've led throughout your career, just to give us a bit of context around you?
Yeah, look, thanks, Brendan. First of all, thanks for this conversation today. Where we stand at the moment is, like I said, as you kindly introduced me, 15 years as a sales leader. I've worked in kind of all those key areas, whether it's leading a local sales team. I've also worked with leading operations as well. So, and then moving into kind of state-based roles in Australia or national roles, it's always been for me about the people. And I guess that level of experience has given me over the last 15 years being able to kind of work with different cultures as well. So you can tell from the accent, I'm originally from the UK, so I've led the teams in northern of England, obviously states and Australia, and then I've managed as well countries as a whole, Australia and New Zealand together. So quite varied, roles in that sense. The way sales works is fundamentally the same, whatever you do. Cultural differences, unique differences, state differences. Apart from that, the fundamentals on sales doesn't really change.
You're right. In terms of the teams that you've led, let's go with the team that you're leading right now. What size, how many reps? Are they on the road? What are they predominantly doing on the phone?
Yeah, we've got a team at the moment of around 12 reps, and they're on the road. They're across the whole of Australia. They're very, isolated in that sense. They are out there working by themselves. We have big teams supporting them within all the regional offices. But really, the roles, as you know, in sales are state-based usually, going out there, winning work, talking with customers, having meetings. And it can be quite an isolating role sometimes, especially, when we look at the western side of Australia. So compared to the eastern side, where we've got a bit more flexibility, travels between all the major cities. So the team is small. I've led bigger teams. So we've had teams of 20, 30 odd people, leading managers, leading salespeople. But this one's a really compact, efficient team, I would say.
Awesome. And then for your team right now, as a great example, when they walk out of a customer meeting, what do you believe actually determines whether that relationship is going to move forward or whether it's going to fade slowly? What's the difference in that interaction, you reckon?
Look, this one's always a big one. I do solution selling programs based on just customer visits. And these can be 1 day, 2 day programs based on that, purely because walking away from a customer isn't just about understanding what I do next, but it's also the whole story that goes into it. Because walking away from a customer, they've got to have a belief that you were invested in their time today. So to your question, what happens next really is how interactive the salesperson has been within that meeting, where they engage, where they listen to the customer, where they really truly understanding them. I think the challenge we all have as leaders is once you walk away from that meeting, the day-to-day happens. So in any big organization, you see it quite commonly, got to get back to an office, got to go and work. I've got to go and get all my administration items ticked off and signed, got to go and complete these tasks and these calls. So for me, from a leader's point of view, it's how do you stop a salesperson in their tracks and go, right, you've just walked out of a meeting. How do you reflect back?
So how do you do that with your team?
And you're going to ask. Look, I think if I attend a meeting with a team, so I try and attend more regular coaching meetings. So I think as a leader, we've got to be careful that we go and coach our salespeople, but we don't lead the meetings. So first and foremost, go coach them. And part of that is when you step back, you're trying to show them how you operate. To make that a bit clearer, you walk out that meeting. My instruction to my guys is go and have a coffee. Go to the local cafe around the corner, sit down, read through your notes, update your notes, and just take, that half an hour to debrief in your own mind. Because if you jump straight back into your car and shoot off to the office or to your next meeting, You're not debriefing and really acknowledging what's happened. And then you're relying on memory later in the day. And you quite see that quite commonly, which is, right, I'm going to go to the end of the day, I'm going to catch up on all my notes. Or you know what, I'm too tired today, so I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then you start losing the traction of what were the key action items you took away. You don't really need to remember everything, but get those key actions that you committed to the customer. And just take that reflection, right? What did they want? How do I plan this? What's my next actions? And what did I commit to the customer in that meeting? And that's when I go with them, I coach them that. So I always take that step back and say, hey guys, let's go for a coffee. And let's take that moment to really reflect, what did the customer want? Did we address their needs, or do we need a follow-up meeting to kind of get back into it? We don't always have to sell or close a deal in those meetings. So it's not about, right, how do I walk away from a customer meeting and close a deal? For me, it's about, how do we walk away from a meeting, understand the customer's requirements, go back to them and follow up on the actions and the commitments that we've made. So it is hard to do. It's a mindset. It really is a mindset, and it is a time management piece as well, more than anything.
100%. I love that, how you encourage your team to actually take the time to take a breath and do the notes properly. A lot of companies are just, no, go out, keep doing as many visits as you can, get all the meetings done, KPIs, got to hit them. But you're actually going the complete opposite, and you're like, no, take half an hour, go get a coffee, debrief yourself. I love that. That's so awesome.
Or a cup of tea. I'm just saying,
Doesn't have to be, you can't have too many coffees in a day.
But you're right. Look, Brendan, the key point is, too many organizations or too many leaders I see get caught in KPIs. Yes, KPIs are absolutely important. It gives us direction and focus. But if we're going to do 50 visits a week, you're just hitting a number. You have no relevance to that customer. You're going to forget about them. Just a number. Your business isn't going to grow. I'd rather see a handful of meetings, really clear, constructive, engaged meetings, where we can walk away and take clear items, clear actions, and try and secure that work. And I reckon you'll see a greater hit rate when you do that, rather than just a KPI number. I think we get too caught in the old mentality, in my view, from those kind of days of door knocking, which I first did when I arrived in Australia in 2010. Is, let's go and sell some products on the street and door knocking and cold calling energy companies. But times have changed from all that now. It is about relationships, and customer meetings, I believe, now becoming more important than they've ever been. It's really interesting to see how that after part works now. And I think this kind of podcast about after part is, you could talk about it for a whole day, and you could coach on it for a whole day, because I think it's a critical part on what you're committed to that customer. Because I think we all know, if we don't take the actions, you break the trust.
100%. That's where that customer friction starts, and that's where you start to lose customers. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's a good lead into the next question, I guess. So when the calendars do fill up and the reps are busy, which is going to happen, like not all reps are going to have great leaders like you that allow them the time to debrief. So what are some things that maybe those reps that are on the burn, that they've got to go meeting to meeting, what things could they be doing, and where do you see the relationships cracking within those if they don't do these things that you're suggesting?
Yeah, look, for me, it's all about that final step of the meeting. Before you walk away from a meeting, you have to be clear on what your next action steps are, both of you, customer and yourself. So quite often, what I'll see is, at the end of a meeting, people don't kind of go back and say, hey, Mr. Customer, we met today for this reason. We explored this idea. I hope I've addressed your issues. We came to this solution. Are we happy? What's our next timescales? What are the next commitments we need? What are your timescales? And I think as a pressure nowadays, as we know, everything's more on time. We've got to get it done today, got to get done in the next hour. I think people are willing to say, hey, Mr. Customer, I will get back to you in a week's time. But I feel we get pressure saying, yeah, I'll get back to you tomorrow, or I'll get back to you later today. And then you don't. And then it becomes a couple of days. I would rather people especially when you're under time pressure, it's okay to say to the customer, like I'm sure we all speak to our colleagues, our bosses, peers, whatever it may be. We say, even our friends, hey, I can't have a beer with you tonight, just a bit busy. Yeah, but let's have a beer next week. Let's commit to it. We do that in our personal lives, but in work, we tend to go, don't worry, Mr. Customer, I will get that done today for you. And then we fall over straight off. take a step back and go, hey, I can't get this to you for another week. Is that okay? And if it's not okay, then say to them, okay, okay, I will address that. But then with the next customer, you've got to manage their expectations. Hey, I've got to sort this out. And I think really clearly nowadays, I think people have become so reactive. We've forgotten about the key fundamentals of time management. So how do we manage our times after those meetings? Do we really need to push our meetings back to back to back to back? I mean, if you're only getting 20 minutes, half an hour with a customer, what are you getting from it? That's what always circles in my mind is what are you really getting for it? And coffee catch-ups are great, don't get me wrong. But if you've got an action, you're time poor, you've got to work with your customer and say, let's set some realistic timetables on this. I will get back to you by the end of the week, or I'll get to you within 2 weeks. Hey, it's quite comprehensive. What I've got to go and research. So do you mind if I work with my team or do this or whatever it takes? But don't be shy to say it. Have that open conversation. And I think people are willing to have that conversation.
I think so too. I think transparency is key in all communication, isn't it? It doesn't matter what you're trying to communicate, as long as you're being transparent. Generally, unless they're 1% of people, they might be a bit upset about it if they're having a bad day. Predominantly, if you're just talking to a human being like a human being, and you be as transparent and open as possible, they're gonna work with you on it because they can see that you're being honest and transparent.
Look at it. Look, it is. You know what? How often do we walk into a coffee store and I've got a great coffee store on the corner from me, and they always say, "Hey, Elliot, you know what? The coffee waits about 25 minutes. Do you want to order one or not?" You know what? I don't have time today. Fine, I'll walk away. I'd rather got told up front than say, "Hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to wait. I'll wait 25 minutes. I've got time. I'll open my laptop and do some work." Or you're going to go, "I'm going to order a coffee." They don't say anything. And you stood there for 25 minutes and you're getting frustrated. It's the same concept. It's all customer service.
The difference is then as well, if you don't tell them about 25 minutes, they are never coming back because they're going to be so frustrated that they are never going to you again. Whereas if you tell them, they'll be like, "Oh, that's cool. I'll just come back tomorrow because you guys are amazing. You're actually honest with me. And I know that I'm going to get my coffee when you guys say."
Exactly. And look, if you can over deliver, I love it when you over deliver. You know what I mean? Which is you've committed to a week. I'll get you on a week on Friday, but you get it to them on the Tuesday. Those little wins help a long way. Give yourself that little bit of breathing space.
I think it's an underused tactic in the sales environment. Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
So many people in sales are often the opposite. They're overpromise, and then they just leave it to the ops team or whoever has to clean up after them to deal with it, and constantly causing friction within departments within the company, let alone the customer. It's just does my head in. But probably my most hated thing about certain salespeople. Sorry, salespeople out there that over deliver.
Yeah, when also you're all like that.
It's just a bit of advice, like under promise, over deliver, because then your customer's always going to be happier with the whatever transpires at the end of it, because you've said that you're going to take a week and then it's come in 3 days. They're ecstatic, as opposed to saying 3 days and then it takes a week. They're going to be frustrated.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point of like that. We talked about after the sale. But the after the sale really is at those final moments of a meeting for me is what have you committed to between you? And you're absolutely right. Too often do we say, that the salespeople are hungry for the win. You get the win or whatever it may be in any form. And then it is, we completely deliver in whatever capacity that may look like, whether it's your meeting, I got the meeting, I've had a meeting, great, tick the box. But then what? What does good look like? That's always the question is what does good look like afterwards? And as a sales leader, that's our role. We have to do that. We have to show them what good looks like and encourage it and coach it. And after the meeting, I love this podcast after the meeting because too often do I see sales managers or sales leaders not do the coaching as well. Or coach once or coach twice, and that's it. I cover the whole of Australia, so I regularly go and see my salespeople. I don't think it's enough just to say, "Hey, I'm going to go and speak to you, once every 6 months or once a year and expect you to know what you're doing." I think coaching really has to be regular. Talk to me about your meeting. What's your next actions? What's happening? We don't need to micromanage, but just, for us, we've got to coach it. People don't naturally fall into those paths. People want to be helped. People want to be guided. What do I do now? How do I learn from this? And I think that's a key part of, after the sale is what are we doing to follow up to make sure people are encouraged and they feel valued in an organization, they feel valued in the decisions that they're making in those meetings.
Love that. And you've almost segued perfectly into my next question too. But before we jump into that, I want to ask some real tactical stuff. I didn't know what said it wasn't going to be tactical, but I feel like this could bring some real value to other sales leaders out
Oh,
there.
you're challenging me today, Brendan.
Oh, no, this should be an easy one. So you were talking about coaching and you like to coach more than 12 months, 6 months. How often do you specifically coach with your team? What is your regular coaching look like with your team currently?
Good question. I really do it on experience. So, I give a lot of people, I always have done, I give a lot more freedom to the people who are experienced and got the knowledge. And I give them different coaching practices where, necessarily the coaching for one person may be about after the meeting. With someone else, it may be more technical or how we coach them as to become a leader themselves. So really got to kind of evaluate what it means, first of all. But if we're talking about after the sale, now let's just talk, somebody, mid-range sales, I'd really try and get to at least a couple of meetings a week with them or a handful of meetings a month if I can. And especially when I've got teams in different locations, then what I'll do on a coaching basis, I'll go to that location. So for instance, for me, I'm based in Brisbane. So Sydney and Melbourne are easy for me. I'm there monthly. And when I go down, I'll go with the teams, sit with them, how it is, coach them through it. But I always take a step back in the coaching. And what I mean by that is I don't lead the meetings. So I am there. I will join where I think it needs to be joined, or I will take guidance from the salesperson leading the meeting. Because we've got to remember, by us taking over the meeting, they're not learning anything from it. And then, as well as that, I try and catch up with everybody. I call everybody most days, just touch base. How are you? More of a, mindset. How are we? How are you feeling? And then I will ask, a couple of times a week, how's your meetings this week? What happened? Talk me through it. What did you do? And give them those kind of coachings. I don't know what's a good practice or what's a bad practice. There's many theories out there, which is, you've got to have team meetings twice a week. You've got to do this every week. But I try and tailor make it to the individual. So I've been very fortunate. I've had, in the last career, I promoted 6 people from my sales team. I've already promoted 2 people within my current sales teams. So I feel like my methodology works well, but it may work, and it works well in my industry, but it may be different for everyone's different industry. But I think, having that regular contact, and it's not a KPI contact, and I'll stress that it is not KPI based. It is, how are you as a person? What's going on? What support do you need? Let me guide you. And I think too often, especially in larger organizations, you get caught in that coaching becomes a KPI exercise. Well, how many meetings did you do? What's your next set of meetings look like? What's your hit rate? What's your win order rate? And I think you've got to be careful with that. And that doesn't become coaching. That becomes micromanaging.
Yeah. And then you also get lost in the details of the numbers as opposed to what's actually happening too. The data tells a story, but doesn't tell the whole story.
I agree. Look, I hope that kind of answers your question. Maybe a little bit vague at times, but
no, I think just to, I guess, recap it in the best way that I can, I think the way that you're approaching it is more of, it's not so much, it can't be a set system. It has to be ad hoc based on the team's experience. So you've got some team members that might only need checking in once a month with a quick phone call. Hey man, you're all good. Is there anything you need? Any customers that you might need some support with? Things like that. And then you've got other ones that are like training up that might need weekly attention, maybe a daily pep talk phone call, and then once a month joint visits with them to make sure that they're on the ball with things and just there to support them in the best way that you can. That's kind of sounds like the way that you're approaching it to me, which sounds like a great way because not everyone's the same and everyone needs different things. So I went in with the intention of getting something specific, but as we know, it doesn't always work like that in the real world, and that's just how it is, and that's fine.
Look, for me, it really is about that individual. And I need to go to every customer meeting? No. And I think leaders get lost in that. I think it's all about what's relevant, what's important, what's going on in that meeting, how can I support and coach that salesperson through it all as well. But coaching's key for me, and I don't think enough of it is done through leaders. I see too many leaders fall into that number trap and that KPI and revenue and money.
Yeah. Lazy management, as I like to call it.
Yes. There's a great there's a great talk from Richard Branson and which has always stuck with me. It's many years old, where he never worries about the profit and the numbers, because if you look after the customer and the employees, the money will come. And that's always stuck with me. So that's why I always take that approach. The numbers will be there. Of course, we've got to report. Of course, we've got to do this, but I'm not going to hunt you down on KPIs and revenue and financial targets, because if you're out seeing customers and you're a happy employee, I know those numbers will come.
100%. People work harder for companies that they enjoy working for. So in the teams that you have worked with and built up, what does good, like you were talking about a good visit before, what does a perfect visit look like for you? If you had to structure a perfect customer visit, what would that look like, including the after, obviously, considering we're talking about predominantly
Yeah,
after?
look, like I said earlier, I've got a whole solution selling program on this. And really, to simplify it, for me, is right at the beginning. What are we going for? Have we discovered, what that meeting's about? And what I mean by that is, have we really spoke to the customer before going to the meeting to go, hey, I'm coming to talk to you about X or Y? And then have we taken half an hour to do our research, gone on LinkedIn, looked at the company, looked at their key strategies, their values, what they're looking at, what they're interested in. Now, from a service point of view, that's easier. Maybe retail sales is very different. But I think understanding what the purpose is critical. And you can share your experience, Brendan, but I see too many salespeople go, right, I'm heading out to a meeting. Have you prepped? Don't worry, I know the guy or the girl. But the point being is, no, you haven't prepped. So you don't know how that meeting's really going to go, and you don't know really what you're talking about. So to go into that meeting, you need to know who they are, what their concerns are, if any, or their positives, what it may be. And then during the meeting, it's keeping the conversations, as we're doing now, to what we're talking about. And I think it's having that agenda of what do you actually have targets to go and achieve from that meeting? What's a key takeaway you want from it? Is it the sale? Is it just to know more information? Is it to know about their plans for the future? And then have a second key takeaway, because as we know, meetings can drift and we find out information that we didn't realize at the time. So have a secondary backup kind of KPI that you want to get out of it. What do I want out of this meeting? And some of it can be really simple. Maybe it literally is, I just want to learn about this company and this person. And that's okay. We don't always have to do a sale. But I think how you structure the meeting is key. I think too often I see as salespeople jump into a meeting. What's your problem, Mr. Customer? I've got a solution. Not really delving into those questions that we need, really understanding them. So tell me about the future of this organization. Tell me about your future. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me how it impacts you, or tell me what's happening here. What's the positives? What's the negatives? Then you can really split out what their needs and wants are. So what do they actually need compared to what they want? And they can be very different sometimes. So if you understand what the actual needs are of the business, you can present the solution. Then at the end, you come back and reiterate that, hey, Mr. Customer, I came to see you today about this. We talked about that. We discovered your needs of this. I've presented this solution. Are we happy? What's our next steps? And then when we walk away, we act on those next steps. Hey, I said I would meet you in another week, or I'd contact you or send you that information. Do it. And that's all for me. It sounds simple, but we never seem to do that. I don't know what your experience is with it, but I quite often see the ill-prepared, jump into a meeting, walk out, don't follow up.
100%. There's so many salespeople that I've seen that just fall into the old trap, especially ones that have been doing it the same. If you're working on a territory basis, which is my experience with field sales teams, often they're visiting these customers every 90 days, every 3 months. So they get so familiar with these customers that it ends up just being a catch up. And it's just such a waste of time. Like, you have to go in there with an objective of what you want to get out of that meeting to actually bring value to the company, why you're supposed to be on the road doing these meetings, not just to go have a Don't get me wrong, it's valuable. The customer gets relationship out of it, which is great, but you can still do that at the same time, also progress the relationship further with an objective that you want, whether it's information or whether it is just to build that relationship. But just a simple thing for me is just having at least one objective that you want to get out of that meeting, going into the meeting, making sure you achieve that in the meeting. And obviously always listen more than you talk when you're in a sales meeting as well. That is number one. You need to make the meeting about them, not about you. And then, after the visit, just making sure you do your notes, making sure that you're doing your follow-ups straight away if you can. If not, at least putting down action items somewhere where you can remind yourself to do it later, whether it's in your calendar or in tasks in your CRM or something like that. And then making sure you actually follow through when you're going to follow through. Don't let things, and it comes back to what we were talking about before with being transparent about when you're going to do things. If you don't have time because you've got 8 meetings on today, don't tell the customer you're going to get back to them today. Tell them you'll get back to them on Friday when you have an admin day in the office. Like, it's just, it can be really simple, but it gets overcomplicated because I know that sales guys get busy and I understand that, but you just have to, what you said before, just slow down, take a breath, plan it out, have an objective, and just make it happen. It's not that hard when you take that time.
You look, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it is easy to say. I agree with you.
100%.
I don't think it's too hard to implement. I think it's just habits. Habits, it's like exercise. I'm trying to get into the habit of more exercise every day. Sign up to a gym. It's a habit. And, it's getting into those habits. And I think that's what salespeople need to do is break into those habits, do the after the sale. And you touched on a really good point there is, for me, most companies now use a CRM software, right? Whether it's HubSpot or Salesforce, which I think is probably the biggest. Whatever you use is get those information in there, because you will never remember why you went to that meeting. As much as everybody goes, oh, don't worry, I remember why we had the meeting. You will never remember. Get your notes down, get them secure somewhere, get them where, other people can see them as well, your colleagues. That's what it's about, is share that information. That's why it's called a CRM, customer relationship management tool. That's what it's there for. So you can see what's happening, look after those customers. Yeah, look, I mean, I had a great boss who used to jot down all the customers' birthdays if he knew them, and used to jot down all the favorite football teams and rugby teams and AFL teams, and kept a record of it. And if they won or whatever, he would send them a message or flip them a text or say happy birthday. Those kind of next steps after meetings are really key. I'm not saying you have to remember and go and ask everybody for the birthdays, but just remembering who their favorite AFL team is or who their favorite rugby team is and hockey team, whatever it may be, is key. It's those little bits that always, customers will always remember you for.
100%. If you can bring that personal touch into a workplace relationship, like a customer relationship, it just brings that relationship to the next level, and you're going to have a competitive advantage over any other company that has a similar offering or is trying to take away your market share. They're not going to touch you if you're doing those personal things as a salesperson. 90% of people are going to be loyal to you because there's just not enough of that, especially in the workplace, in a professional environment. That, in my opinion, there's not enough of caring about what people are like in their personal lives. And then when you make the effort to do that, it goes 100 miles past everyone else.
And you know what? And you can fail sometimes, and they'll be okay about it because you've got that relationship. It's that trusted advisor pyramid that we're all aware of. Is how do I go from that kind of lower level to becoming the trusted advisor? And that's why I really like this podcast of after the sale, because that is, for me, one of the big fundamentals of the trust part is, yes, you've had a meeting with me, but can I now trust you to go away and action the items that you've sold and become my trusted advisor within our relationship, so I can just come to you?
100%. I love it. Okay, it's probably another good segue into this next question. From your leadership experience, where do you think most managers unintentionally lose visibility into the reps' relationships with their customers? So this is from a manager perspective.
Yeah, look, it's really hard, and none of us are perfect in this space. I think for me, quite often we get caught in all the managerial administrations and reportings, and we do lose focus ourselves on what's happening. I think I look at who are that kind of key touch point customers. I try and keep an eye on what's happening. And I think as long as you're using CRM tools or a way that we have visibility as a leader to know, hey, what's going on. And it's giving trust to the salespeople as well, that they can reach out to you about customers or key relationships. For me, all customers are important, but obviously some valuable, some are less valuable. But what we want to be able to do is keep that focus as much as possible. So I have a regular way of, I look at what we've done that week. So every day I log into our CRM system, I check what's happening just to know, half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, just so I don't lose visibility of it. And, if I see Meetings are caring. I'll just quickly touch base. Hey, I see you're meeting this customer. Do you need me there? What's happening? I kind of try and pinpoint as well what's going on. I think as much as what you say about salespeople keeping to time management, I think as leaders, you've got to have a kind of rigorous process as well for your own self to make sure you've got time. So I always save myself, before any meetings commence, I always do my kind of CRM activities, check everything, make sure it's not a KPI. I'm just keeping across the eye of the business, see how things are trending, what's happening, who the key customers are, where the investment of my time needs to be, etc. Because it is easy, especially when you're managing people in different states. Again, when somebody's in Perth, they're a lot further away than someone who sat next to me in the Brisbane office. So it's easy to lose that focus and to get, brought into the attention of what's happening locally or predominantly on the Eastern Seaboard. Yes, they're the biggest cities, but, we've got big growing markets out there that we need to be across as well. So for me, as a leader, keep your focus, keep your time management up to date, do your kind of preparations in the morning, your preparations in the evening. I try and color code my diary, so I'm quite clear of where my priorities sit as well. So I've always kind of worked to that strategy and idea of making sure I'm not losing focus where the key needs to be.
That's awesome. I really like that. I rather like that point of view. You touched on CRM tools. In terms of, how do you view the data that you get in your CRMs in your experience, not just with your current team, but previous teams as well? Do you feel confident in what data is in your CRMs? Is there pieces that you tend to see often get missing, whether it's other teams or old teams or current teams even? And what have you done as a leader to try and help that as well?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. At the moment, we've moved to a new tool and from an older one. So we've been experiencing it the last year. So we've been able to kind of control the data quality a lot more. The problem is, during the transfers, data migrations, you always get issues. So we're in a privilege at the moment of trying to keep that data clean. But in a previous role, we've got 20 years of absolutely terrible data management. And it is difficult to maintain. And the problem you have with the CRM tool is everybody has access to it. So if there really isn't standard, clear processes and guidelines on how to do it, or regular coaching and training, it all falls apart. And I think it's up to a leader as well to kind of monitor it. I know it can become quite a hard task at times, but for my role particularly, I do take quite a hard line on the cleanliness that my team put in, because it's so important what we do. At the end of the day, we're winning the work, we're booking the orders through that system. So we've got to make sure it's clean before it gets passed to operations. But also we have other teams who can come in, edit, change, whatever it may be. And whether it's temporary staff or permanent staff who are here for short periods of time, people come in and dabble in it. It is really difficult to control. I think you've just, as an organization, got to have clear processes. And one thing I always do see, I've seen it regularly, people see the CRM tools as a KPI tool. So nobody's invested really in managing the data quality that comes out of it. So unless you really do drive it as a tool that isn't KPI based, so it is about, hey, how did that booking go? How's that customer? What's the situation with this job? Rather than show me your numbers, show me your numbers, show me your numbers, you get them to more buy into updating the system. Whereas if it's just a KPI, they will just do the most minimum to show what they're doing. And for me, if you can we use Salesforce, but if you can get it right, I find it such an incredibly powerful tool, absolutely incredibly powerful tool. We've just got to convince, sales teams what it can do for them. At the moment, most organizations use it as that KPI tool. What's your orders? What have you booked? Where's your target? How many customer visits have you done? And so that will always be messy until you can really use it as a clear tool. I think it's all going to be a challenge. And always do the training. There's not enough training on it. I think too often now I see leaders, in so many cases, I see a manager go in, I'm going to train you on Salesforce with, I think they do this, I think they do that. This is what we're going to do. That's your training done, and never come back to it. Never follow it up. It's not a monthly exercise or weekly exercise or part of the one-on-ones. Hey, let's check on your Salesforce quality. I just see that time and time again. Let's just get your numbers in and move on.
Into the choir.
It's hard. It is hard.
Yeah. It's another great segue. I can't believe how great these questions are segueing into a natural conversation. If you had to, right, if you had to coach one behavior that protects customer trust more than any tool or KPI, what would it be?
Good question. One thing I would coach on, for me, it is purely communication. I think above all is, and I think it's really key for your podcast here, which is how do we communicate to that customer? How do we respond? And making those commitments, keep your morals high. That's the way I would say it, is time management is absolutely up there along with communication. How do you respond to a customer's email? How do you interpret it? How do you call them? If you're going to call them, give them a call. If they call you, call them back. I don't think it's complex. I think the world has built a large number of tools, and we've got AI now around us that can support that. But fundamentally, for me, it is communication. How do we work and talk to our customers and respond? I don't think it needs to be more complex than that. I think if you could get that right, everything else would flow. But because we don't get it right, then we bring in the tools, the KPIs, the customer visits, the targets, hit rate, etc.
That's where the band-aids come in.
Exactly. We all hear that expression, putting the band-aids on. But for me, yeah, communication, time management are my top two. I'm sure others have got different views on it, and I love that about leaders. Everyone's got something a different view. But I mean, what would be your view?
One behavior that protects customer trust. I think we've touched on it throughout this whole podcast today. I think it's transparency and communication, definitely. Like, it doesn't matter what you've got going on in the business. If things are crashing and burning, as long as you're transparent with your customers, they're going to understand somewhat. They're not going to be happy potentially if it's really bad. But if you're open and transparent about it, you're not going to lose that trust you have as a rep with your customer. Yeah, they may lose a bit of trust in your operations team if they've been out of stock for 6 months or whatever, and they've been waiting forever for this product. But as long as you're open with your communication and transparency, you're protecting your trust with the customer, which is, as the point of call to the customer, that is one of the most important things you need to protect. Transparency has to be, which is part of communication, definitely. So it's I've kind of jumped on your one, but that has to be the number one behavior.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, with transparency? No matter how many times you say to people, give the customer the bad news, people don't want to give that bad news, but give them the bad news. Tell them your coffee's going to be 25 minutes. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. As long as you do it early enough.
Yeah.
Don't leave it to the last minute.
Yeah. But this comes down to the transparency, isn't it? And, I think there is got to be careful with the grey line of, internal challenges, whatever may be happening in an organization you don't want to share. But things like you go, hey, you know what? I've made a mistake. I forgot to order your part, or I forgot to do this. You know what? If someone says that to me, I'm like, yeah, no worries. We're just, when's it going to be here so I can plan it? But what's going to happen next? I'm quite okay with that. And I think most people are. Like you say, transparency, communication. I'd be shocked to think if there's much out there than those two key fundamentals of working with customers on coaching.
100%. All right, I've got one last question for you, one to finish on. If you had to leave one piece of advice for sales leaders and reps listening today, other than what we've already spoken about, what would you leave for those out there?
Look, what I would say is break the habit, and what I mean by that is take the break, finish your meetings. We're talking here about after the meeting. Go and take that break. Take your time, communicate, be clear with the customers, be transparent. It isn't hard. It's not complex, but get that right and you'll build the trust. And there's a trust equation out there. So I think for me, break the habit, have that coffee, take your time, take a breather.
I love that. I am going to push you on it though, and just say, because there's going to be reps out there that don't have the opportunity to do that. If you were their leader and you were in a company, I know you probably wouldn't be in a company like this, but if you were in a company that was pushing them to the limit and they didn't have time for that break, what advice would you give them so they can still under promise, over deliver and still make the relationship happen in the way that you want it without, ultimately we want them to take the break, right? But not everyone has that luxury, and I understand that. So what advice would you have for those reps?
Yeah, take a step back and communicate with your customer in the meeting. Don't walk away from that meeting without an agreed communication next items. And I mean, hey, Miss Customer, I will come back to you in 1 week's time or 2 weeks' time or later today. But if you make that commitment, you've got to follow it up. So give yourself breathing space.
All comes back to it, doesn't it?
Yep. Yep.
It really does. Thank you, Elliot. I really appreciate your time, mate. You've been amazing. Thank you for all your advice and all your answers. It was a great chat, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk.
Yeah. Good. Excellent, Brendan. No, really good. And hopefully something comes for many leaders and salespeople from this as well. I'm sure customers will listen and go, I can relate to this.
I'm sure they will. Thanks, Elliot. You've been great. This has been After the Visit. I'm your host, Brendan Welsh, and I'll catch you next time.
Cheers. Thanks, Brendan.